Hello, this is Joe. Welcome back to the channel. Well, today's video started out a few weeks ago with me wanting to do a simple comparison between two electric typewriters in my collection that were both made in Japan by different manufacturers. But as you can see, well, we have the Japanese Nakajima-made Olympia reporter here, but this is an American-made Smith Coronet, or I should say SCM Coronet Automatic 12. This typewriter's name is Jitters, by the way. It's actually been at my brother's house for a few years. I just got it back yesterday. So the idea for this video was going to be a simple comparison between two typewriters, but it turned into more of a bigger comparison between a larger number of typewriters. So I'm basically featuring all of the electric Type bar typewriters in my collections. This is essentially all the electric machines that have moving carriages like a manual typewriter, but they are operated with an electric motor. So the only typewriter I'm not going to cover is my family typewriter over at my brother's house, that is the Hermes 10. But I'm going to cover all the other electrics today. Hopefully this video will be useful to you in deciding what electric typewriter to get, or like me, you just get them all. That's another option. Well, to kick off this cavalcade of electric portable typewriters, we should talk first of all about the Smith Coronet 5TE on your left. This was an electric version of the 5 Series Smith Coronet manual portables. This particular manual portable is the Silent Super from 1955. It has an X suffix in the serial number, meaning it was a special ordered keyboard, so this has the number 1 and exclamation mark. In contrast, this is a 1960 5TE electric, and the electrics had the number 1 key, that more modern keyboard standard with them. So 5 years difference between the two. Essentially, your 5TE electric is the electric version of the 5 Series manual. The bodies are a little bit taller. You might be able to see the difference in the height around the front of the body, and therefore the holiday case that the 5TE came in is taller than the manual version. But everything else is essentially the same. The carriages are identical. The Silent Super and the Silent had the quick change, quick removable platens. So does the 5TE. In fact, you could swap the platens between the two machines. So here you can see the height difference between the two machines. It looks to be a little over 1 centimeter or so taller for the 5TE than the Silent Super version. So the keyboard of the 5TE has the same layout as your Silent Super. You have a key set tabulator set and clear on your right. The tab key is right next to them. Margin release is right next to them on the right side. Backspace on the left. And shift lock, the manual ribbon reversing lever just to the left or just above the backspace lever. The bichrome lever on the right side above the tab clear button. So one of the differences, though, you have these two additional controls just in front of the ribbon cover. So the one on the right is the power switch. It's a rotary style switch like that turns to turn it on. There is an interlock switch right here on the ribbon cover. If you open up the ribbon cover, it will shut off the motor. And then this control on the left is the impression control, which controls how hard the type bars hit the paper. And then underneath the front of the machine is a rotary control, which is the touch control, sort of how sensitive the keyboard is. One other functional difference is the dash and underscore key is a repeat key, which you don't have obviously on a manual typewriter. And some of the later 6 Series electrics not only had the auto repeat key for the underscore and dash, but they had the period and the X as well. This also does not have auto repeat on the space bar. It is also electric in its shifting. So this is a segment shift machine just like the Silent Super is. This is also segment shifting, but it is power shifting. So when I'm pressing the shift key with the machine powered off, the segment is not dropping down. So it uses the power cam to do the shifting. But the backspace is very much manual, as is the tabulator. The space bar is electrified. So with the power off, it won't space. These are great. I think these rank way up there. In all the electric typewriters we're going to look at today, these are some of the very best, I think. Well, when you get into the 1960s with Smith Corona Marchant SCM and their electric typewriters, the serial numbers are not as easy to discern what their ages are. And every model had a different letter prefix on the serial number, and you don't see all of the letter prefixes available on the typewriter database. Just the data isn't there. So this is a 1960s era SCM Coronet Automatic 12. So as the 12 might suggest, it's a 12-inch carriage similar to the Galaxy 12. I believe the platen is interchangeable with the Galaxy 12. It has very much the same styling of a 6 series, like a Galaxy manual typewriter. It has the pull-out ribbon cover, the same kind of plastic card guide, the same kind of plastic bezel surrounding the keyboard. But of course, it's electrified, and in the case of the automatic part of the name, this is an automatic carriage return machine. So that gives it quite a bit more energy in its operation as compared to the 5TE from the 1950s that is a simple manual machine. So if I turn off the Coronet, you might be able to tell that the sound, the idling sound of the 5TE is much quieter. And of course the carriage return is like a manual 5 series in terms of its sound. So if I turn off the power and we turn back on the Coronet's power, so one thing you'll notice is the idling sound is quite a bit louder on the 6 series machines. And I have 3 6 series machines. All of them are rather loud. So they use 2 belts. The primary belt goes from the motor pulley to the intermediate pulley, and then the secondary belt goes from the intermediate pulley to the drive pulley that drives the fluted shaft or the spindle underneath the linkages that actually does the powered typing. These belts are problematic actually for both the 5TE and the 6 series electrics. The belts is a whole topic we should probably cover. But before we do that, let's just look at this. One of the things I find really cool about the Coronet Automatic 12 specifically, and I'm not really sure when this feature went into effect, and that is it has half line spacing. So it goes from 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5 to 3 line spacing. So this is a feature that I always felt Smith Corona should have done years earlier than they did, because their European and Japanese competitors had half line spacing. So they were kind of late to the game, I thought, but this Coronet Automatic 12 has it. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the half character spacing feature that some of the other electric Smith Coronas, like we'll see the Electra 120. The Electra 120 has full line spacing, but it has half character spacing. So it's kind of like, well, Smith Corona, make up your mind. Either make a machine with all the features. Maybe they did. Maybe I just don't have it. And now I have a bulletin just handed to me. If you like this program, please like and subscribe. I don't know what that means. Well, this is the SCM Electra 120. This is from the 1960s. It's one of the other 6 series electric type R machines. The real difference in the carriage between this and the Coronet Automatic 12 is this only has full line spacing, 1, 2, or 3. It doesn't have the intermediate half line positions that the Coronet does. So on the 6 series electrics here, you have the copy set control is on the very left. It goes from 1 to 10, basically how hard the type R's hit the platen. You have the color selector for the bichrome on the right, just like you would expect on a Galaxy. There's actually a ribbon reversing switch. So even though this is the 1960s and it uses reversing eyelets and the ribbons, This is sort of a carryover all the way back to the Corona days of the 1930s and earlier, where they offered you the option of a manual ribbon reverse just in case you were still using old style ribbons without eyelets, I guess. Backspace on the left, margin release on the right. So with the 6 series, the tabulator goes up on the bar up here above the back row of keys, and then there's a set and clear buttons on either side of that tab bar, very similar to a Galaxy 12 or another manual 6 series. I'm going to turn the machine on. So this is a manual carriage return electric, unlike the Coronet. I like the little padding on the handle of the carriage return lever. It's like a little rubber padding. It's kind of a nice feature. Another nice feature I like is the power light. It is a neon lamp, 120 volt AC neon lamp, which is pretty cool. As you can tell, it does make noise, and this has the original V-Belts in it, which do run loud. And by the way, I was told by John Lewis that about the noise. I said, did they always run loud like when they were new? And he goes, well, secretaries would come into their office and they would turn the machine on in the morning and they would leave it on all day. And as the machine heated up, the belts would soften and they would get less loud. Now, I haven't actually done that test to know whether that's actually a fact today with these old belts. In any event, looking at the other features here, so this has the auto repeat underscore and hyphen, auto repeat X, auto repeat period, which is nice. Spacebar does single spacing. There is a separate powered space key next to the spacebar, and it also has a half space button, and that is a manual half space. You can turn the machine off and it'll still half space. The powered spacebar, however, requires electricity. So this is one of the features, the half space, that I wish the Coronet Automatic 12 had, because along with the half line spacing, those two would make it very competitive against European typewriters. One of the other features on the 6 series is down below underneath the machine in the front. You have your touch control, how hard the keys are, and they're very soft. There's very little difference between the hardest setting and the lightest setting. I actually prefer on these 6 series SCMs, I like to run that touch control a little harder, because at its really lightest setting, it's actually too easy to hit a key. Like if you just errantly press down one of your fingers like you didn't intend to, it's a fraction of a centimeter is all it takes to trigger a letter. So I prefer to have a little bit more force required to type, so I don't mistype as often. Anyways, this is a Electra 120. They made an Electra 110. I think that's a 10-inch carriage. They made an Electra 220 and 210. I think the 200 series Electras were automatic carriage returns, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, these are nice machines. They're very similar to any other 6 series electric, but they run rather loud, as you can tell. And of course, the Coronet also runs loud. And not only do you have a choice of between automatic and manual carriage return, but there's actually a choice in the carriage width as well. And one of those choices of different carriage widths is this SCM that has a standard 10-inch carriage. Let's actually measure it, shall we? The rubber platen is 9 1/8 inches wide. You could call it a 10-inch carriage, but the actual rubber surface is just over 9 inches. So this is probably the narrowest SCM 6 series machine they made. Now, I'm saying SCM, and you may notice this says Singer. I know it's a little bit of glare. So this is branded as a Singer. That's the company that made sewing machines, etc. SCM made these for Singer. This is a Singer Electric, so it's basically a smaller version of a 6 series electric portable. Same sound. Yes, it has that same sound. So it has the same 6 series layout. The copy set is here, the touch control underneath the front, ribbon reverse manual, backspace here, margin release here, bichrome, power switch, power shifting, just like all of these 6 Series electrics, they have power shifting, and then the space bar. So the space bar has 2 positions. If you press it lightly, it is 1 space at a time, and if you press it down further, it's a repeating space bar. So you remember on the Electra 120, they needed to have a separate repeat button next to the space bar, but this one has it incorporated into the space bar itself. Unfortunately, it is a whole line spacing. It just has 1, 2, and 3, and there's no half spacing feature either. They're pretty reliable otherwise. I really don't have too many problems with them. I think the biggest problem you'll probably see are the belts might break. And this one I've replaced with round O-rings instead of using the V-Belts. It originally had V-Belts. And it runs about the same in terms of loudness, regardless of whether they're V-Belts or they are O-rings, actually. So one of the issues with both the 5TE and all of the 6 Series Electric Smith Coronas is the belts. So this is one of the original belts off of the Coronet Automatic 12. It is a V-belt, so the top surface of the belt here was the outside of the way the belt wraps around the pulleys, and then the inside of the belt, which you can kind of see underneath here, is like a V shape with a truncated edge. The inner edge is cut off a little bit, so it's like a truncated V. So in essence, it is a 3-sided belt. The problem is they don't make these belts anymore. And there were some aftermarket belt manufacturers who used to carry these 3-sided V-belts. They aren't being made anymore as far as I can tell. This is what can happen to these belts over time. And the original belts is a fibrous belt. It's rubber, but it has this fibrous material on the inside, which kind of reminds me of a miniature version of an automotive belt, right? So it's not just pure synthetic rubber. It has these fibers in it. So in lieu of getting the proper V-belts, what some people have tried to do is use square cross-section belts. But the problem with square belts is they are designed to be square on the pulley, and if you try twisting them so the corner of the belt is acting like a V, then what happens is the belt will twist itself back. Just won't work properly. And so what most of us are doing these days is we're using round cross-section O-rings. The ones I use are about 4 inches in diameter, and they are used as the sealing O-ring for a water filter canister. But the plumbing section of hardware stores usually has those kinds of O-rings, and that's what most of us are using. The problem with these O-rings, though, is the primary motor pulley is pretty small in diameter, and the belt has to be able to make a sharp bend around the primary motor pulley. And that's why they're using V-belts, because V-belts can bend a shorter, smaller radius bend than an O-ring or a square belt. So here are the belts for the Singer. These are round O-rings I'm currently using. This intermediate pulley, the reason why it moves, that is how they adjust the copy set, is as I increase the tension, you can see this pulley moves toward the front of the machine, which stretches out the primary belt. And if you leave it to a lighter setting on the copy, it puts less tension on the primary belt. So they basically use the principle of variable slip on the belt to control how much torque, how much force was hitting the platen with the type bars. And let's power it on. And there you can see as I adjust the tension of the copy set. So we're looking down the primary belt toward the primary motor pulley, and one of the problems with using round O-rings is that you might be able to tell that this belt is coming very close to rubbing on the underside of this bracket right here. So over time you might see some black shavings, little rubber specks starting to build up, and for that reason I like to typically take the copy set and adjust it so the pulley moves forward a little bit, which drops the belt down from rubbing on the corner of this frame right here. And that usually extends the life of the belt. Okay, this is the Coronet Automatic 12 and its V-Belts that are currently installed as I turn it on. So compared to the O-rings that are installed in the Singer Electric, you can see the V-Belts ride much closer to the primary motor pulley, and therefore they don't rub nearly as closely to this bracket up here. There's a lot more clearance. So they're able to make that tighter bend around the primary motor pulley. And that's the prime advantage I see in using the V-Belts. The pulley diameters were designed for the V-Belts, not the O-rings. But unfortunately, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to find proper replacement V-Belts for these 6 Series Smith Coronas. Hence why we have to use round O-rings. So I think to summarize the whole Smith Corona electric typewriter thing is the 5TE, I think, is the quietest of all the Smith Coronas. Smallest and lightest also. But the 6 Series seem to be fairly easy to find in the United States, and despite the fact that they tend to operate a little bit louder, they're quite reliable. And even if the belt breaks, you can use the hardware store O-rings, and they seem to work okay. They might shed a few rubber particles if they're rubbing, but they're easy to acquire and fairly easy to replace. So I think these kind of machines are like workhorse electric typewriters. They're not super fancy. They're kind of like old American cars in a lot of ways. They're not built to the same standards as the German typewriters maybe, but they seem to work fine. They're rugged and they do the job. So I think of all the electric typewriters in my collection, the Olivetti Praxis 48 is probably the most exotic, the most beautiful. Unfortunately, this particular specimen, it has the irreparable, at least up to now, irreparable problem with the automatic carriage return. In the meantime, until I delve back into it, I have put blocks underneath the powered carriage return buttons to prevent me from pressing them, which would lock up the cam, the power cam on the machine. In any event, all that to say that I love this machine, even though the way I currently have to use it is with the manual pull and twist carriage return method, which is still pretty quick. So very unique styling. I've done a video about this before, so we won't spend a whole lot of time on it. It is noticeably quieter than the Smith Corona 6 Series typewriters. These Praxis 48s were designed to be over 150 words a minute typing speed. So if you're looking for a really super fast typewriter that can out-type a Selectric even, this is probably the machine that'll do it. It also has a nice fat platen roller, so if you're interested in doing like postcards or stiffer kinds of paper, it's really a great machine. And of course, it's hard to argue with the cantilevered modernist design, and I really like the keys. You might think they aren't very comfortable. They're kind of like mesas or flat mountaintop shaped keys, but they work really well. And also, if you're a person with long fingernails, I could see one of the reasons, maybe besides the design of it, was with long fingernails, your nails aren't going to dig into the keycaps because there's space around them for your nails to go. In any event, these are beautiful typewriters. They actually type, I would say, quieter. The actual typing sound is quieter than the 6 Series. The idling sound is a little bit noisier than the 5 Series, but probably quieter than the 6 Series. But this is definitely a typewriter that you should put on your radar screen if you want an electric typewriter, European made, these are made in Italy, that is really hefty, heavy duty, and beautiful to operate and beautiful to look at. Well, finally, we get around to what I originally intended this video to be all about, which was a comparison between these two typewriters. On your right is an Olympia Reporter. This is made in Japan by Nakajima, made in like 1983. On your left is the Royal Saturn, and this is the smallest, lightest, most basic electric typewriter in my collection. This was made by Silver Seiko in Japan and is essentially an electrified version of the manual Royal Mercury. Very kind of distinctive shape and color. Let's turn them on, shall we? So first of all, the Olympia. I think as far as the idling sound, it's second quietest to the Silver Seiko. Silver Seiko is the quietest idling. If you were in any kind of a noisy environment, you wouldn't even hear that at all. However, that being said, both of them are now on. The typing sound, I find the Silver Seiko, the Saturn, to be slightly louder to my ear. It's a different pitch. Yeah, I think the Olympia to me sounds a little bit less rattly, but keep in mind on both of these machines, turn them off here, I have added additional soundproofing too. I have added some urethane foam on the inside of the plastic body shells of both of these to make them quieter. This comparison might be a little unfair to the 6 Series Smith Coronet Electrics, but keeping in mind that none of the 6 Series typewriters had any kind of soundproofing to speak of at all. They had a little thin layer of that dark brown kind of tar looking little thing they would put up on some of the panels, but didn't really help at all. Let's look at features, though, between these two Japanese-made portable electric typewriters. Well, the biggest feature difference really is that the Saturn, it is a manual carriage return. It is basically just like the Royal Mercury. But the Reporter is a powered carriage return, and you might have noticed it's much quieter than the Smith Coronet powered carriage return. And it's actually the Praxis 48, when it was working, its powered carriage return was louder than the Olympia Reporter. So that's quite impressive for the Olympia to be able to compete at that level, this Nakajima typewriter. Okay, other differences between these two. Okay, I've done a lot of test typing on both of these machines in the last couple weeks, and I can say that I consistently get more typing errors on the Saturn. And the reason why is the Saturn uses carriage shift, and it's that unique kind of carriage shift unique to Silver Seiko, where maybe actually the Hermes Rocket and Baby have this. But anyway, it pivots the carriage. Instead of lifting the whole carriage, it pivots it. So it's a little bit easier to move. But when you're going from uppercase back to lowercase, you're relying on gravity to pull the carriage down. Whereas on this machine, it is a powered shift. And it is segment shifting. The carriage moves almost instantaneously as you press and release the power shift key. The net result is, with the Saturn, I've had repeatedly the case where if I'm starting a new sentence, I capitalize the first letter of the first word, and then the next letter, which is lowercase, will be below the line because I hit that letter before the carriage could drop down all the way. And I've repeatedly done that over and over. So the carriage shifting is slower to return itself. So this typewriter really wasn't built for speed as much as these others were. This is a slower typing electric typewriter. And the other thing I've noticed is I can out-type the spring motor. Now the spring motor tension feels about the same as my manual Mercury, but there are times if I get really into a staccato arrhythmic typing style, I can sometimes start to pile on letters with the Saturn. The Saturn is the most manual of all of these machines. It does have repeated period, repeated X, and repeated underscore, but the spacing is strictly manual. And if you turn it off, the spacebar still works, the tabulator works because it's strictly manual, and the backspace works. So it is essentially everything is a manual typewriter except for the type bars themselves. And it doesn't sustain as fast of a typing speed. But on the other hand, the Olympia Reporter is a much faster typing machine, not only because of the powered carriage return. It has the repeated X, the repeated dash, the repeated period. It has repeat space bar, and it has a half space key, and it has half line spacing, 1, 1.5, and 2, which the Mercury does, or the Saturn does as well. But I think as far as feature set, the Olympia Reporter comes the closest of all of these typewriters I've shown you. It comes the closest to having all the features I like. Repeat spacebar, half spacing, half line spacing, power shifting that's fast, powered carriage return that's not too violent and not too loud. And it has proven to be quite a reliable typewriter. Now, the original belt on this typewriter is a toothed style belt. I would really call it a notched belt because the pulleys that the belt mounts on themselves are not toothed. They're untoothed pulleys. But the reason why they have like teeth or notches in the belt is because it helps it bend better around the small diameter primary motor pulley. And I've replaced that notched belt with a round O-ring, and it works fine. Okay, so again, the round O-rings come to the rescue when it comes to many of these electric typewriters, but not all of them. I didn't show you the Praxis 48 has toothed belts, 2 of them, and toothed pulleys, right? So with the Praxis, if the belts break, if you can't find exact replacements, you're out of luck. But with this one, you can use round O-rings, which is cool, the kind you get in a hardware store. Okay, this is the O-ring that I've replaced the notched belt with on the Reporter, and there it is running. It runs a lot smoother than the 6 Series Smith Coronas, less vibration, less chattering, much, much quieter. This notched belt for the Reporter, and because it's such a soft rubber compound, it can flex, it can bend around a very small radius pulley. You can see how that is able to bend so easy because of these notches on the inside of the belt. Let's do a brief synopsis of all these typewriters and their typing sound or their typing noise, how I rate them. So I've rated these 5 types of electric typewriters by their sound level quietness rating. So we have idling sound and while typing. So 1 is the quietest and 4 is the loudest. I'm just using arbitrary units here. So we have, in order, the Royal Saturn, Olympia Reporter, Smith Corona 5TE, and this category is all of these 6 series averaged together. They're all pretty much the same, 6 series electrics, and the Praxis 48. This table, by the way, I actually did on the Praxis 48 using a ballpoint pen in the hole of the card guide to draw the lines, and of course typed it on the Praxis as well. So starting off here with idling sound. So the Royal Saturn is the quietest, followed by the Olympia Reporter. I've given the Praxis a 2.5. It's slightly noisier than the Reporter, but quieter than the 5TE, followed by all the 6 series are the loudest. So now for the typing sound, the Olympia Reporter is the quietest, followed by the 5TE, and then I'm giving equal scores to the Royal Saturn and the Praxis 48. They're not quite loud enough to be a 3, but they're a little noisier than the 5TE. And then finally, the 6 series electrics are the loudest. So then for totaling these up, I'm giving a weighting factor. So I'm saying that you take half the score for idling and 100% of the score for the typing sound. And I'm doing this weighting factor mainly because most people are going to be using the typewriter to type with, not just to have it turned on. So the idling sound it makes is less important than really the total sound of typing. But I've included both of them in the factoring. And what it comes out to be is the Olympia Reporter is in first place, the quietest, followed by the Royal Saturn, keeping in mind that both of these typewriters have additional sound insulation that I've installed. Third place is the 5TE, followed by the Praxis, and finally, of course, the 6 series electrics are certainly the loudest. So there you go. So if I was going to be shopping around for one electric typewriter, I really think the Olympia Reporter is going to be a better typewriter overall than any of the others. It certainly types faster than the Saturn. It is less trouble prone than the Praxis, and certainly much quieter than the 6 Series. They're just not quite as common in the United States as the 6 Series. And there were also a couple other models of Olympia electric type bar machines made by Nakajima besides the Reporter, so look at those as well. But I think the 5T and the Reporter would be high up on my list of an electric type bar machine that's fairly reliable and not too loud and works really good. Well, I hope this was an informative video, giving you some good information about what to look for if you want an electric typewriter that makes the typing process easier and faster, especially if you're a prolific writer who touch types and needs a fast operating typewriter that doesn't fatigue your hands for hours on end. An electric typewriter can be a good tool in your arsenal of writing tools because they are so quick, speedy, effortless, and do the job so well of putting words on paper. And, as always, stay creative and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.